Treflip. In terms of the direction of a flip, it is essentially a combination of a 360 pop shove it and a kickflip. However, even if you try to combine them, it usually doesn't work very well, because there's a mechanism that doesn't exist in those tricks. In this video, I will explain scientifically how a Treflip flips and why it doesn't. First, let's think about how the board flips. There are mainly two ways that causes a flip in a Treflip. One that uses the front foot to flick the board, and one that relies solely on the back foot. When using the front foot, you first twist the toe of your back foot inward to give the board an angle. Then, by flicking the front foot off the board, you create the flip. When using only the back foot, the flip is generated by utilizing the rebound force of the tail and the rear track. As you pop the tail while twisting your back foot inward, the board spins that way, and its center of mass gains energy to go upward. Now look at the compression of the rear track. When it's compressed, it tries to go back, while this force alone is too weak to cause a flip in your board. Because the board already has energy to go up, the only thing it has to do is to give it a little nudge. As a result, when they combine, they cause the board to flip. You might have seen someone do a Treflip with their front foot on the nose. In such cases, it can be said that the flip is generated using only the back foot. Similarly, in my previous video, I did Treflips using a board with its side cut off. In this case too, the same principle was used to flip the board. Whether you use the front foot or not, the key point in both methods is how you use your back foot, specifically twisting it inward. It is not about kicking it backward. It actually does involve the motion of swinging it to the side, but it's not like you have to swing out your whole leg forward. Instead, what you should focus on is a compact, inward rotation of your leg and ankle around the vertical axis, what I call the Z-axis. Normally, when you crouch, your back foot tends to open to some degree, and when you stand up from that position, its angle doesn't really change. Rotating your toes around the Z-axis is similar to standing up while simultaneously turning your toes inward. If you were to imagine the motion, it's close to applying force diagonally downward in a spiral path with your toes. At Why the Trek, we consider what is often described as the scooping motion of the foot to refer to this very action. Again, it's not like this or this. It's this inward twist. At least in my case, when doing a Treflip, I focus almost entirely on this movement of the back foot. In other words, I treat achieving this back foot motion as the primary objective, and I use the rest of my body in whatever way is necessary to make that happen. Conversely, whenever my Treflip doesn't work, it is always because this back foot motion isn't being executed properly. However, the trickiest part is that it's not as simple as just twisting it harder. Under some conditions, this twisting motion becomes difficult to perform correctly, or even if you are twisting, the board may stop flipping altogether. But don't worry, the reasons why the board stops flipping and how to fix it can all be explained scientifically. Let's start with the most common issue, timing. Ideally, you want to scoop the tail at the very last moment, but the harder you try to scoop, the more likely you are to rush the timing. Let's see why this happens and how to solve it. When you crouch, a downward force is generated in your body. To counteract such force and push your body upward, a large force is generated in your legs. The problem is that when you're focused so much on flipping the board, you may rush the timing and start twisting your foot while your entire legs are trying so hard to lift their body weight. as the force to twist your foot is significantly smaller compared to the force to push your entire body upward, it gets overwhelmed. Does it make sense? It should be looking more like this. At the beginning of your jump, bigger muscles like thighs lift your body weight. And it's the very last moment that you should finally do the scooping motion, not in the middle of the jumping motion. You might think if the ankle force disappears, then I can just twist my ankle again. However, the force used to twist the back foot is generated basically only once per attempt. Just like how the ankle snaps only once at the exact moment you leave the ground in a jump, the twisting motion also occurs only once. Therefore, if that twisting motion is used up too early, you end up jumping up without any remaining force to flip the board. So, how can we fix this problem? In theory, you should wait until the very last moment just as your body fully extends from the jump before twisting your ankle. However, this goes against intuition. The more you want to flip the board strongly, the more likely you are to put force into your ankle before completing the jumping motion. So instead of changing how you jump, let's adjust how you crouch. Fundamentally, the reason the force of your ankle gets overwhelmed is that a downward force is acting on your body. Meaning, the further you lower your body, the more pressure your feet have to endure. But when trying to secure enough airtime, you instinctively want to jump higher. And to jump higher, you naturally have to crouch to some extent. So adjusting only how low you crouch to reduce the force of the body's fall can be said to go against your instinct. I mean, it's absolutely fine to try not to lower yourself too much if you can jump high enough by doing so. But depending on your body structure, it might not be natural for you to jump without crouching so much. So rather than trying to avoid crouching too low and making it uncomfortable to jump, try to control how fast you crouch. And you can crouch as low as you want while controlling the amount of the downward force your body will gain. Even during crouching, if you engage your leg muscles and consciously lower yourself slowly, the downward momentum acting on your body will be smaller when you lower your body to the same height. The same applies to treflips. When crouching, you don't need to completely relax your body and let gravity take over. Instead, use the muscles in your legs to control how fast you lower your body. This alone will naturally reduce the downward force acting on your body. By doing this, the downward force acting on your body will be minimized, allowing you to lift your body with less force. As a result, even if you begin applying force to your ankle while your body is still extending, that force is less likely to be cancelled out. This allows the force in your ankle to remain until the moment your foot leaves the tail. You get it? In a treflip, it's easy to get the impression that it's all about timing. Jump, extend your body, then scoop. But it's only natural that you start putting force into your legs earlier when you want to flip the board. However, since there is still a lot of force throughout your legs at that point, the scooping motion gets cancelled out. By consciously crouching more slowly and reducing the energy of your body's downward motion, the scooping force becomes less likely to be overwhelmed. In other words, the way you crouch allows you to manipulate the timing. Even after you get the timing right, the board often doesn't flip well. Then, it is only natural that you try to scoop the tail harder. But there is a mechanism that the more you try to force your back foot to scoop the tail, the harder it becomes for the board to flip. To understand why this happens, we need to look at how the body moves at the moment the ankle is used. When the ankle is used properly, the body extends from the back all the way to the toes. And at the very last moment, just as the toes leave the tail, you twist your ankle inward. That is the correct body usage and timing. The problem arises when you focus too much on the twisting motion. it causes excessive force to build up in the back foot, which results in the back foot stomping on the tail. Take a look at this example. The left shows a failed attempt, and the right shows a successful one. The approach motion is almost identical, yet only the left fails. This is because there is too much emphasis on pressing the tail with the back foot, causing it to be stomped. When too much force is applied to the tail like this, the board begins rotating too much while it is still in contact with the ground. As a result, neither of the two methods explained earlier will allow the board to flip. When you use your front foot, at the moment you want to flick the board, it is no longer there. Because the board has already rotated too much, your front foot ends up just cutting through the air. And when you use only your back foot, the board's excessive angle relieves the track's compression. Worse still, since the back foot is still on the tail, it may give you aboard a spin, but not a flip, causing it to become something like a 360 pop shove it. In this way, stomping on the tail can lead to problems such as landing primo, or the board not flipping at all. Try recording and analyzing a whole movement. If the board has already rotated more than 45 degrees before the back foot leaves the tail, there is a high chance that this is the cause of the issue. So, what should you do? In theory, you should avoid stomping the tail. You should lift your body first and then twist your ankle at the very last moment. However, the more frustration you've experienced from the board not flipping properly, or the more painful prim landings you've had, the more natural it is to put excessive force into your back foot. And relaxing the body and removing unnecessary tension is not something that comes easily, especially for someone as rigid-minded as myself. Because of that, instead of immediately trying to change how you use your body, it's better to force a situation where the board will still flip properly even with large forces applied to the tail. And the way to do that is by adjusting your back foot stance. Let's consider what happens when moving the board from its default position to the moment when the back foot leaves the tail. If you place your back foot near the base of the tail and press it down, you'll notice that even a very small movement is enough to move the board sufficiently. Needless to say, if you press down the tail even more from this position, the board will rotate more than necessary, which causes the problems explained earlier. Now, what happens if you place your back foot closer to the tip of the tail? You'll notice that from the default position until the tail hits the ground, the foot has to travel a longer distance. When you compare the two, the difference becomes much clearer. Please don't get me wrong, placing your back foot closer to the base of the tail itself is not wrong. It's just that the harder you try to scoop the tail, the more unnecessary force builds up in your muscles, and you may end up stomping the tail unintentionally. Placing your back foot farther toward the tip of the tail gives you more room between the ground, which helps you avoid the problem. Once you can consistently feel the board flipping, unnecessary tension in your body will gradually fade away. Try to find a stance that works best for how you use your body right now, and the rest will follow. Now, next topic. Although this might stray a bit from the topic of why the board stops flipping, in relation to the crouching motion, we need to consider a common mistake: leaning too far forward and falling over when crouching. As a premise, in a tray flip or shove it, the board naturally swings out toward the toe side. This happens because the board rotates while the wheels remain in contact with the ground, making the wheels act as a pivot point, which pushes the board's center of mass toward the toe side. However, just because the board moves forward does not mean you should consciously try to jump forward. moving your weight consciously forward essentially means kicking the ground backward, which increases the horizontal force on the tail, causing the board to shoot out even farther forward. Also, trying to jump forward not only makes it harder to keep your board under you, but also leans your body axis, causing you to step off your board. Let's see what gravity does to your body when you crouch. Needless to say, it always pulls your body straight downward, and you can freely move your body up and down as long as your body axis is upright. But if your body axis is leaning forward until you reach the lowest point of your crouch, gravity continuously pulls your body downward, further increasing the angle of your body axis. Once this happens, there is no way you can stop it. Remember, controlling the speed of your crouch is one of the most important keys to scooping the tail effectively. For this reason, when you crouch, you should always keep your body axis upright. The shift of your body weight toward the toe side happens after the crouch. As you begin to twist your back foot inward, your weight gradually shifts onto it. Since your back foot is on the toe side of the tail, loading weight onto it naturally tilts the truck toward the toe side. As a result, your body axis also tilts toward the toe side. So even if you try to jump upward, as your center of mass is on the toe side seen from your feet, your body weight will naturally lunge toward the toe side. You see the difference between this and consciously jumping forward? Again, if you jump forward, you'll be pushing the tail backward, which in reaction sends your board forward. So, instead of doing that, crouch vertically down in a way that you control how fast you lower yourself. And as your board tilts, extend your body straight upward from your feet to your center of gravity, which pushes your body upward and gives you enough airtime, and at the same time helps you avoid pushing the tail horizontally too much. In fact, the direction you jump plays a major role in how easily the board flips. As mentioned earlier, twisting your back foot creates an angle in the board, which makes it easier for your front foot to catch it. At the same time, compression in the rear track helps initiate the flip. When you push your weight straight upward from your feet toward your center of mass, you're effectively applying force perpendicular to the board's tilt. This allows you to lift your body while maintaining that angle. If you want to jump higher, you should straighten your body axis and jump more vertically. However, if the direction of your jump deviates too much from the board's angle, it becomes harder for the board to flip. For example, if you have your body axis completely vertical, the angle of the board and compression in the truck will naturally be released. Once the board loses its angle, it just becomes harder for your front foot to catch it, because when it's angled, in a way it bites into your front foot. But when the angle is released, the board becomes flat. It is still possible to flick it with the front foot, but it just becomes harder. And if you use your back foot, even if you scoop the tail after the compression has been released, the board may still spin, but there is nothing that can cause the flip anymore. The solution is similar to the previous one. Jump without strain too far from the direction that is perpendicular to the board's tilt. If you find your board isn't flipping well, try adjusting the angle of your body axis. There is usually a small range where you can lean your body axis without falling. Trying to consciously lean forward might help you flip your board easier. Now let's take a closer look at the placement of the back foot. First, let's consider the structure and mechanics of the human foot. Imagine standing on your toes. You can raise your body using the ball of your foot, but you can't stand on the tip of your toes, right? In this way, the amount of force that your toes alone can generate is pretty much limited. Therefore, in order to apply force to the tail most efficiently, although it is only a difference of an inch, placing the ball of your foot, not the tip of your toes, on the edge of the tail makes a big difference from the perspective of human anatomy. Next, the angle of the back foot. Let's think about how muscles behave in general. Just as your arms can produce more force when they are slightly bent rather than fully extended, muscles are able to generate greater force when they are already somewhat engaged rather than completely relaxed. Take advantage of this characteristic to find a stance that makes it easier to flip the board. If you're duck-footed, try turning your back foot so that it becomes at about a 90-degree angle. If your toes normally point straight forward, try aligning it slightly inward. This creates a state where the muscles that twist your back foot inward are already slightly activated. And just like arms, they can generate even bigger forces. On the other hand, placing your back foot too open can prevent you from effectively generating rotational force in your toes, for the same reason that fully extended arms struggle to produce strength. The key to maximizing the twisting force of your back foot is to start from a position where the relevant muscles are already somewhat engaged. Keep this in mind as you experiment to find the angle that suits you the best. Up to this point, we've mainly focused on the use of the back foot, but in order to apply force effectively to your feet, we also need to look at a bigger picture, the posture. Once again, let's compare a failed attempt with a successful one. In the failed case, you can see that the body is significantly lower. This is not only because the tail is being overstomped, but also because the spine is bent. First of all, in order to transmit force effectively to the back foot, the skeletal structure needs to be aligned in a straight line. It's just like your body extends in a straight line when you jump. The force generated by extending your legs is transmitted through one vertebra to the next, pushing your body weight upward. Here, it's important to remember that pushing something is equivalent to being pushed back with the same amount of force. In other words, if you have your spine straight and try to push your body upward, your feet will be pushed back with the same amount of force, which allows you to transmit energy to the tail effectively. On the other hand, what happens if your back is bent? Even though the force from extending your legs still travels through your spine, it can't push your body upward in a straight line, and the magnitude of the force gradually diminishes. Because the force that you push your body weight upward is weaker, the reaction from that force also becomes weaker. If you feel like the tail isn't hitting the ground hard enough, then try focusing on having your back straight when you fully extend your body. As I've mentioned, the most important part in tray flip is the motion of the ankle. Please use the motion analyzer to break down what you're doing. You can adjust the position and magnification of videos, play them frame by frame, and compare videos next to each other. It also supports YouTube videos, so try comparing your movements with others. And you can even visualize the path of your body parts and simulate your movements in the 3D environment. All these can be done on one screen. The only thing you need is a web browser, so be sure to make use of it. And that's all for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.